Morning, thank you very much. It is a short presentation, and what do we do for rolling on the slides? There we go. Sorry. Let's see. That way? That way. Great. Okay, sorry. Just a few, just to put it in context, and this is probably no surprise to anyone here, food fraud is ranked number 6 of the fake honey is ranked number 6 of the food fraud issues in the EU. This comes from a study that was done in 2016. And in that study, they identified that about 20% of the EU honey had suspicious levels of added sugar in it. About 10% of the blends of EU and non-EU honey had suspicious levels of sugar in it. And in addition to that, you had the IOHE claim that the cost of fraud to the industry was worth about $600 million a year worldwide. So when we're talking food fraud in the specific context of the honey industry, it is a significant thing. And I make the point that for many years, while it's been a bit of a laugh to go to Hong Kong or to Bali and to buy a knockoff watch or a handbag, when it comes to food fraud, it's no laughing matter. So what's law enforcement doing about the problem? It's obviously a significant problem. What is actually happening? I've just picked up 3 cases that were highlighted in the media recently or over recent years. These were particularly high-profile cases where law enforcement was able to seize fake honey or adulterated honey, and it was successful in prosecuting the perpetrators. One of these was in Chiang Mai in Thailand, in northern Thailand. One of them was in Pakistan, and the other one was in Australia. In all 3 cases, the honey was diluted with other sugar syrups, either cane sugar or corn syrup, obviously the cheapest source of sweetener, and it's a deliberate an intention to defraud the consumer. Just also worth talking about quality and quantity of production methods. I'm so sure that you're probably familiar with it, but the question is it actually food fraud when we're talking about production methods? And data provided by FAO showed that the global production of honey in all countries except China has been relatively stable over the last 2 decades, whereas China has doubled its production in the period 2000 to 2016. And part of the reason for that is raised through the way that the Chinese production method uses unripe honey to speed up the production and processing volumes for honey. Of course, they have also introduced some extra hives, but it is a production definition issue as well. So when we talk about traceability, and we've identified part of the issue with being able to trace product is the reason for looking at food fraud. And there are regulations, and I've just highlighted 4 here, just by way of illustration. 2 of them are relevant to New Zealand. The first is the New Zealand MPI General Export Regulations. If you're intending to export honey, you need to have traceability. The second is the biosecurity regulations, obviously for managing the risk of American foul brood. The third is the European regulations. If you're intending to export to Europe, you must comply with their requirements. And the last one is to highlight FSMA. FSMA is the US FDA's Food Safety Modernisation Act regulations, and that introduces requirements on traceability as well. So there's significant markets for export. They're worth considering if you're looking at that, but apart from that is also just you're meeting your own domestic requirements. Beyond regulation, we also have standards. So we have ISO food standards, the ISO 22000, is a food safety standard put out by the International Standards Organisation. There are other food safety standards, but I'll just highlight this one in particular. ISO defines traceability as the ability to follow the history, application, movement, location of an object through specified stages of production, processing and distribution. It is a general food safety requirement. In this case, we're talking about from the hive to the consumer and all points in between. It covers the entire food supply, all of the commercial interests in handling the ingredients and the finished product. So in this case, it's not just about packaged honey that's sold on the supermarket shelf. It's also about the use of honey in processed and value-added manufactured product, whether that's breakfast cereal or energy bars or the like. And in this case, I've also included pharmaceutical because it can reasonably also cover the cosmetic and soap industry, which is an area for honey as well. One of the reasons why you look at traceability is fraud. One of the other reasons that you look at traceability is the capability to execute a food recall efficiently and at minimum cost, but with the protection of the consumer in mind. So traceability, covering from A to Z, what data should be collected, and I've just highlighted a few of these. So who made it, where did it come from, where did it go, where was it produced, how did it get there, all of the basic questions that you want to know. So this is also a requirement that comes under the general export requirements for bee products, Part 4 regulations for New Zealand MPI. It's also worth thinking about, can laboratory tests detect fraud? There are quite a number of tools in the laboratory arsenal. Chromatography is a science that's been around for a long time, but you now have nuclear magnetic resonance mass spectrometry, which is particularly effective, stable radioisotope analysis, DNA, RNA, PCR amplification. These are all techniques that are valuable and useful in identifying the fingerprint of where the products come from, and to that extent can provide the evidence and the tools for criminal prosecution to demonstrate that it's not what it says it is. But can it stop fraud? And the answer to that is no, it can't. Traceability is your best chance. It's your best barrier to protecting your industry from fraud. And how does that really work in practice? Because it's not just about identifying pieces of information, it's how you link it together. Blockchain is a technology that you may have heard a little bit about. In this industry, it's something that is almost unheard of, and there's still a lot of work being done in the food industry to link it together. But blockchain essentially manages the process of collecting the data from point to point, and it puts the data into an immutable chain of evidence so that what you've got, instead of being traceability of one step forward and one step back, you know where you got it from, you know who you sold it to. With blockchain, you can see literally the entire chain of data. As the producer, you should be able to see where that data has gone to, where the product has gone to. As the retailer, you should be able to see all the way to the beginning. Where did that product come from? So it's based on the ability of exchanging data between trading partners. Now, it's not to say that this is anything particularly new. GS1, for those of you who are familiar with it, has been about developing global standards for the exchange of data for many years. And it's, if you're not familiar with it, GS1 is the company that stands behind the barcode. All of the information that sits behind QR codes and barcodes is developed by GS1, the global standard for exchange of information. It's an essential data set for being able to exchange and work with your retailers as well. So there are other technologies for product authentication, and I've just listed a few of those here. There's a range of commercial solutions that support traceability and that are based on authentication of product. These few examples have developed different scopes and applications, and they're used to manage specific market needs, such as hive traceability, through to providing greater assurance and confidence in authentication for consumers. But I also want to talk about third-party certification. There are some of these that you may be familiar with. I'm sure as sponsors and involved with the conference, you probably come across these companies as well. True Source Honey tests honey and traces it from the beekeeper to store shelves in the US. It's a US-based certification system. And they are also looking at extending their traceability system into value-added products and manufacturing as well. I've mentioned 100% Pure Honey, which also uses a smartphone app to provide consumers with the ability to verify the authenticity of the honey. It is about providing and empowering consumers to make informed choice. And lastly, I've highlighted Assure Quality's Assure Quality Traceability program, which is an on-pack QR code based on SKUs to provide independent New Zealand government-owned supply chain verification. These are all based on certification systems, so it's not just about what goes on the package, it's about the systems that go behind it and the confidence that you as the supplier and the manufacturer and the retailer can have that it has independently been audited and verified. Because no matter how good the system is, it is about tracing the authenticity and the capability of the system. What does certification mean? Well, ultimately it means you have to have the system independently audited. There needs to be evidence to be reviewed, valid harvest dates, declaration forms, verification procedures for honey box identification numbers, reconciliation of traceability documents. The hard evidence that auditors are looking for that demonstrates the system is bona fide and hasn't been just filling in the paperwork. So just in a few closing comments. Traceability is about authenticity, it is about food safety, and it's about consumer trust. Everyone has the same problem. They don't know who is at the other end of the supply chain. They're not sure exactly how the shipment of materials got delivered to their warehouse, where they were produced. And from the producer's point of view, there are concerns about the risk of fraud and damage to their brand and their reputation. Businesses need to share more information, which can be difficult when there is a commercial sensitivity and businesses see little incentive to share. Trust is not a given, it's earned. While there are regulatory requirements and traceability programs built on third-party certification to ensure the reputation and trust across the food supply, protecting the safety and the quality of products that consumers purchase. Technology solutions are multi-layered, and the rewards are there for those that share and those that utilise the information to improve the benefits across the entire food supply chain. This means that the farmers are incentivised to join and share trusted information. Brands see two-way value creation, bad actors are minimised, and the risks are mitigated. So thank you very much.